Hey, it's Bradley, back here for another episode of Overkill Reviews. You know, it's Banger's weekly metal review show, but you already knew that because you clicked on this. So, I just got back from tour with a band called Frontier, literally 2 days ago. So while you're watching this, I'm probably like suffering from immense jet lag and just asleep in bed. 3 years and 2 months ago, to the day, was my first ever appearance on Banger doing the deathcore episode of Lockhorns. And this band was the most modern one that I added to the family tree. Funny story, death metal's Glenn Danzig, aka Chris Barnes, got mad at Thy Art Is Murder for naming their song Human Target. He can't really get mad at them naming the album Human Target because the 6 Feet Under song came on the album Haunted, so whatever. Anyway, like I said, this album is called Human Target by Thy Art Is Murder, out today on Nuclear Blast Records. All right, so let's hop in both a time machine and an airplane, go back to 2006, down under. The band formed in Sydney, again, in 2006, and then 4 years later released the technical mindfuck of a deathcore album, The Adversary, which was their first with vocalist CJ McMahon. On their next album, Hate, they kind of stripped back the technicality for more of a mid-paced stomper that was just like brutal throughout. And then on the 2 albums that followed, they slowly were working on getting that mixture correct and coming up with their sound, including on 2017's Dear Desolation, which I reviewed for Banger and gave 4 out of 5. Fans had a bit of a scare that CJ might not have been on that album when he exited in late 2015, but he returned to the band just over a year later and has been happily screaming his lungs out since. As I said, they've been kind of honing in on their sound since their 2012 sophomore album. It's time to find out if they've got closer to that ever-elusive perfect point or if their mixture is getting kind of diluted. I just want to start off this review by saying that the album title, Human Target, is hard as fuck, and when I heard it, I was like, yes, that is awesome. As far as the music on the album, the middle section is what really exemplifies what Thy Art Is Murder do best. Eternal Suffering is probably the most straight-ahead classic Thy Art Is Murder song on the album, and it really illustrates why the band got to where they did. It's brutal without feeling the need to just consistently bludgeon you. It's catchy without feeling like it falls into like some lazy formula, and it's just fun to listen to. The chugs and quiet talking in the beginning of Welcome Oblivion remind me of Tactical Nuke by the Acacia Strain, but instead of being greeted by like a downward spiral of tempo into the void, you get more of that, you know, typical Thy Art Is Murder sound, which is energetic, again, catchy, brutal, etc. I interviewed CJ for Aggressive Tendencies back in 2017, and he said that one of their main influences as far as metal is Behemoth, and that might be more apparent than ever on this album. The song Make America Hate Again is a perfect example of that band's more death metal side, yet it somehow also exemplifies the Thy Art Is Murder sound. It kind of closes out the middle trio of classic Thy Art Is Murder. Anyway, one Behemoth referencing song is not really enough to make this their most Behemoth album, so I'm going to bring up the song Eye for an Eye, which is more akin to maybe something off the Satanist or Behemoth's most recent album, and then the song Atonement kind of splits the difference between their death metal side and their more recent sound. Hell, there's this little tongue roll on the vocals in Voyeurs Into Death, and it reminds me a bit of Nergal, so hey, considering Behemoth is a huge influence on the band, I'm sure they're very proud of this. All right, so yeah, I just mentioned a vocal flourish, and I really do need to highlight CJ as maybe the shining star of this album. He's kind of brought in his range here. I mean, he's always had the range, but he's typically kind of stuck to the middle of his range. This album, he's going a little bit lower more often, and it does add nice dynamics to the album. He's one of the few vocalists who can hold a candle to Whitechapel's Phil Bozeman when it comes to vocal delivery, with all these creative phrasings and stuff that could turn even a more banal moment of the album into an interesting one. And the lyrics play a huge part in this album, and if you want proof, go read the press release. They name check 9 of the 10 songs and go in depth on what the topics are. So very clearly the lyrics are something they hold near and dear to their heart. And rather than falling victim to deathcore's typical lyrical topics, the band focuses on more socio-political topics such as organ harvesting, addiction, social media's effect on mental health, sexual violence, the list goes on. Hell, Atonement is the song about sexual violence, and it highlights the fact that a lot of, that goes unreported, and it also serves as a literal atonement for some of the band's earlier lyrics, which did fall victim to the deathcore, overly violent, overly misogynistic bullshit. So the fact that the band is self-aware enough and I guess humble enough to own that and put that song out really makes me respect them. All that being said, deathcore ain't a genre that's particularly known for its nuance, and Make America Hate Again loses its satirical element because of that. I know from reading the press release that it's meant to be something of, a satire of the concept that any government could make any country great for the masses, which is just not possible. But repeating that phrase over and over again in a genre where, the lyrics are often muddled under like these growls and stuff, and it's really hard to make satire come across, and it just kind of comes across as corny. It's unfortunate and ironic that at song number 4 on the album, it is the first song that could be considered great, but it's a misstep because every time this phrase comes up, it just kind of takes me out. The first 3 songs on this album aren't bad, they just kind of lack riffs. And a metal album that lacks riffs is not necessarily a very good metal album. Instead of riffs, they focus on chugs and chord progressions and end up feeling a little repetitive for it. The title track, which played earlier, and I specifically chose that portion of the clip to illustrate what I'm about to explain, patiently builds drums atop of this bedrock of just slow chugs with the occasional temper tantrum of dissonance. The main difference from the intro portion to the first verse portion is in feel, with the drums being consistently faster and the energy going. It was a cool idea, but not cool enough to carry a song for nearly a minute and then consistently come back throughout the song. There are some creative flourishes, but the overall reliance on chugs just kind of strips the potential. The second single that they released, Death Squad Anthem, falls into the opposite trap. It starts out with this cool palm muted riff, which by the way is one of those cool creative flourishes in the title track, but then it just falls into chord-ul drudgery. So yeah, at times the band kind of just chugs along, and we're gonna keep chugging along to The Verdict. One thing that frustrated me about this album is that Die Hard as Murder continue their trend of dropping a standalone single before an album that is one of the, if not the absolute best song in that year's collection of Die Hard material. I don't know why Death Perception didn't make this album, just like I don't know why No Absolution didn't make the last album. I think on this album, Death Perception would have added a much needed shred factor to counterbalance the chugs. I think the band is kind of pulling in 2 opposite directions, with one half of them going towards the behemoth style of things. I mean, hey, if you read the press release, they actually don't call themselves deathcore, they call themselves blackened death metal. While the other half is just going more towards chugs. It's really strange to double down on your behemoth love affair while spending the first 3 songs of the album and pockets throughout doing something that they would never do, which is chugging ad nauseum. You've proven that you could do better on Make America Hate Again musically, so why not continue doing so? I think that this album suffers from a similar problem that the latest Bloodbath did. When both bands were coming up, the scenes that they were a part of were kind of withering around them, so that made their bloom seem that much more lively and brighter. And these days, deathcore is just more bountiful. We just had a new album come out from slammy deathcore band Brand of Sacrifice, we're on Summer Slaughter. We have a new album coming out next week from a more progressive take on the genre in Humanity's Last Breath. And out today, we have a new album from Sanction, who provide a little bit more of an old school deathcore style. Beyond that, we had the 3-way vocal swap of Chelsea Grin, Lorna Shore, and Signs of the Swarm, which found all 3 bands upgrading. So yeah, deathcore is in a great place now. So because of that, a band kind of experimenting with their sound but not being fully sure where they're going with it just doesn't hit the spot as much as it should. So for that reason, I'm giving this album 3 out of 5 skulls. All right, so my first shout out, you know, I already mentioned it a little bit. It's Sanction and their album Broken in Refraction, out today on Pure Noise Records. Again, it's a little bit of like a more old school take on deathcore, early Suicide Silence, etc. You should listen to it. Also out today, we've got All Out War and their album Crawl Among the Filth on Unbeaten Records. They're like hardcore's answer to Slayer with all these like evil ass riffs, but then sick mosh parts. You can't not like this. I mean, you can, and if you disagree, you can comment down below. Same thing with Thy Art is Murder. Comment down below. See you later.